Assalamu alaikum wa rahmatullahi wa barakatuh. You're listening to Legal Hour and Radio. We were both trying to do it at the same time.
Yeah, assalamu alaikum everyone. This is Selena and
Mohammed, you're listening to Legal Hour,
Wednesdays at 11 a.m. Well,
Radio
just past
Ramzan
11.
London on 87.9 FM. You can listen to us live on ramadanradio.org. Remember last week, if you tuned in, we said we wanted our first caller, our first WhatsApp message, some form of communication. We want this to be the show where it's the first time that happens. So the number to do that on is 077 614 60614. Do you
That's
say the number?
077 614 60614. And today's show is actually ideal for everyone to call in because we've actually called it the it's the legal hour, but it's the pick and mix legal hour. So we'll be talking about a whole variety of different things. So any questions that pop up, there's no specific area that we're sticking to. Obviously, criminal defense, that's what we specialize in. But
Freestyle.
freestyle, yes.
Freestyle. I think you're feeling hungry. That's why you called it Pick a Mix.
I thought it's the best name. It's the variety.
Shall we give the listeners an overview as to what we've discussed? This is it penultimate show?
Yeah, I think it is our penultimate show.
And next week might be Eid. Next Wednesday. So let's give the listeners an overview as to what we've discussed so far.
So on our first show, when we kick-started, it was more about how we came into the profession, the reasons why we came into the profession. We spoke about teachers being a great influence in terms of how they teach the subjects. They can make a dull subject entertaining and quite enjoyable, and true for the opposite as well. A teacher could equally make a really good subject quite dull depending on how they teach. So teaching skills, and it's not just confined to teachers, is it? I suppose it goes to every step.
Yeah, obviously it's not just down to teachers. It's you need to play an active part. They only give you the skeleton of the topic, and then you need to go and read widely, carry out your own research, and enhance your understanding of the area. So the buck doesn't stop just with the teacher. It much is dependent on the student as well, and particularly at university, if there are any teenagers, A-level students listening, at a lot of university is independent study, so it's very different to how you're taught at college. You'll have to take on the responsibility to read widely. Just attending lectures, taking notes may not be enough. If you want to get a really good grade, that is.
And the thing is, it's not just confined to studies. I think it equips you for later on in life because those are skills that you're going to routinely use, especially if you are going into the legal profession, to be able to go through a lot of material in a short time, trying to really effectively put forward your communication in terms of when drafting and so on. So it's helpful.
Yeah, just don't read the material at night. You may not get get past the first few pages, so try and read it during the day. For certain topics, that is.
I enjoyed land law at university, but I always found that it kind of sometimes put me to sleep quite easily.
I know that's why you said you enjoyed it first. I know the end of the sentence would confirm you didn't. How do you get solicitors to go through a short document? We just had a question. How do you get solicitors to go through a short document?
We don't really have short documents, do we?
Yeah, they don't exist.
No, they don't exist. A short document's usually about a still substantial number of pages. It's more of the skill of knowing what you're looking for. For example, with we deal with criminal defense, and you get your case papers, and you have certain categories of offences. So you know what the makeup of that offence is. You know evidentially what you're looking for, and I think that comes more from experience.
Yes. Yeah, experience definitely builds a person's capability. So we spoke initially about how we got into law, our experience. Then we spoke about how you should, if you are stopped or searched, or if you have any sort of interaction with a police officer, you should always ask for a solicitor, and exercise your right to silence unless and until a solicitor arrives. And in the UK, you can access a solicitor at the police station for free. It's covered by legal aid, so that's regardless of how much you earn. So you're entitled to free and independent legal advice. We also discussed, sometimes there is a reluctance, because sometimes there is a stigma attached to, I've been stopped by the police. I don't really want to tell anyone. But all discussions with a solicitor are private and confidential. So you're in safe hands. Everything you say to your solicitor, disclose to your solicitor, it's kind of insulated. It doesn't
Yeah.
go
So
outside of that room.
even if family members or friends, whoever wants to call and find out, they're concerned about you, just want to know, we can't discuss that with them until the client gives their consent. And also they can give consent as to what extent they want the information discussed, if it's the full details of the case or if it's just the bare minimum, for example, the next court dates and stuff like that, for instance.
Yes. And then we talked about the journey a case takes from the police station, what the outcomes will be. If it does result in a charge, then you obviously have, the case will go to a magistrate's court. All cases in the UK start in the magistrate's court. Even if it's a murder, it will start in the magistrate's court and then within 48 hours go to a Crown Court if it's a murder. But no matter how serious, no matter how minor, all cases start in the magistrate's court. Some cases we discuss can only, that their lifespan is in the magistrate's court, because don't know whether listeners remember, but some offences we discussed last week are what's called summary only. Therefore, they can only stay in the magistrate's court because they're very minor. So, for example, driving offences.
So it's based on the category of the offence. So and the maximum sentence that they could get for those offences, for instance, at the magistrate's court would be a 6-month custodial sentence.
Yes, whilst that is true, if the magistrates feel that a greater sentence is appropriate in the circumstances, they can send the case to the Crown Court for them for you to be sentenced at the Crown Court.
But that's only for an either way offence. So that's either way offences are ones that can be dealt with either at the magistrates or the Crown Court, so hence the name. And again, that's deemed as a slightly more serious category of offences. And then you've got the very last, which is known as the indictable only offences. So those will start at the magistrate's court, but they're destined for the Crown Court. All they'll do is you enter a plea, whether guilty or not guilty, or you can give no indication, and then it just gets sent to the Crown Court.
Can you give some examples of indictable only offences?
So, for example, robbery is an indictable only offence. Robbery is when you, robbery is when an individual takes something from another person.
Let me simplify it. Robbery is basically theft with violence.
Yes. I was going to give a more visual description.
I don't have anything on me at the moment.
I've said that to Mohammed before.
I don't have anything on me at the moment. But,
I said that to you before. I said theft with violence.
No, I said that to you. Yeah, and plus we're not on camera, so you can't give a visual demonstration.
I think women remember better. No, I was going to give you a visual demonstration with the words. It was going to be so eloquent and descriptive that you would have imagined it. But I think the moment's gone now. So
no,
it's gone.
All clients want to know is they want everything in a simple form. It's easy to complicate things. that is the basic definition. Robbery is theft with violence.
Yeah.
And the violence theft is regarded under case law as a continuing act. So the violence doesn't necessarily have to happen before the theft takes place. It can happen after, it can even happen during,
Yeah.
for it to be a robbery. And that's a case of hail.
I don't think they need case law, but
Yeah.
it's helpful. I'll make a note of that on mine for next time.
Mm.
But yeah, so that's robbery. Robbery is an indictable only offence. It's classed as a very serious offence, so it goes straight to the Crown Court. And depending on the type of robbery, I mean, the starting point is 1 year custodial sentence, and you could look at a range of, I think, goes up to 12 years. 12 years for a robbery, depending on the details.
How is the sentence determined? Do you want to tell listeners how do you come up with those figures?
So you look at what's published is called the sentencing guidelines, and the reason these guidelines are published to provide consistency in the way that sentencing is passed.
So everyone's treated equally.
Yeah, so that there's a equal treatment. Now you say, how do we know where each case kind of falls? Well, you look at the facts of the offence, you look at the details of the offence, and there's something called culpability. So whether a weapon was used, whether it was something that was premeditated, so there was some prior intention and prior planning, or whether it was something where it was just done on the off chance that, you know, someone just saw someone and just decided, okay, they're going to rob them. So they take into account all of those factors, and whether also the person that's committed the robbery has any mental disabilities, or, you know, any kind of personal issues to kind of lower that sentence. And then they also look at the harm that was committed, the extent of injuries suffered.
So and they also, look at a number of factors, basically.
And also the person that was robbed, if it's like a particularly elderly person, a young person, you know, the impact that it has on them. So all of those things, it gives you information to then look at where the sentencing might fall.
So what's can you name another indictable in the offence?
Yeah, so for example, burglary is ordinarily an either way offence, so it can be dealt with either in the magistrates or the Crown Court. But if you have previous convictions and this is your third burglary offence, then that becomes an indictable only offence, and that goes straight to the Crown Court.
Just to remind listeners, you're listening to The Legal Hour with Mohammed and Selena on Ramadan Radio London 87.9. Listen to us online at ramadanradio.org.
And you can contact us on 077 614 60614.
We want to make this to show where we get our first call, first communication, text, WhatsApp, or call.
Yeah.
Feedback, questions, and comments.
So back to our pick and mix. So Mohammed's given a really good definition of robbery. I'm sure none of you guys will forget what that is now. It's theft with violence. And so assault, a lot of people have heard the term assault, but we don't necessarily know what assault is. Assault is when you threaten immediate violence on another person, and they're in fear of that immediate violence.
Well, it doesn't necessarily have to be threat. As long as a person fears that immediate unlawful violence will be, or apprehends that violence will be used towards them, that's an assault. As long as they have the apprehension, it doesn't necessarily have to come as a threat. It's just the apprehension, so it could be by your actions, by what you're saying, any gestures, and an assault, it doesn't necessarily, an assault doesn't involve touching.
Yeah, no physical contact.
The lowest form of assault is common assault. That's without contact. That's where the person apprehends that violence is going to be used towards them. And then it comes under the same legislation. There's assault by beating.
Mm,
As
that's
awful as it sounds,
unlawful touching.
yeah, that is basically where contact has been made. So there's common assault, assault by beating, and then what's the next one in terms of severity?
It's actual bodily harm.
Yeah, do you wanna?
So actual bodily harm is when it goes beyond just the unlawful touching. It's when where the injury leaves. I think that's the one where it leaves some sort of marks or bruising. That's actual bodily harm.
Well, actual bodily harm has been defined in case law. The case escapes me, but it will come to me at some. But it's any hurt or injury calculated to interfere with the health or comfort of the victim. That is what case law has defined as actual bodily harm. So any hurt or injury calculated to interfere with the health or comfort of the victim. I've forgotten which case that comes from, but that is the precise wording that is taken from that particular case.
Yeah.
So common assault, assault by beating,
And then
actual bodily harm.
And then grievous bodily harm. That's known GBH.
So,
That's the more serious of all the assaults.
and GBH, there's two branches of GBH. One is section 20. So first of all, GBH is very serious injury.
Yeah.
It's
like your broken ribs and stuff like that.
Yes, and break in the continuity of the skin is GBH. So the dermis and the epidermis, that's GBH. It breaks through the skin. So that determines the injury. What differentiates the two categories of GBH is whether it falls under section 20, which is the less severe category, or whether it falls under section 18. The injury is the same. So what's section 20?
Section 20 is when it's done through recklessness, when you're just reckless. Section 18 is when it's with intent. So you've intentfully caused severe, intentionally caused severe injury to another person, and you wanted to cause that injury. Whereas reckless is where you've kind of more careless, unintentional.
Yeah. Under section 20.
Under section 20, yeah. So those are the two branches. And section 18 is Crown Court, isn't it? Yeah, I think they are.
Believe so.
And obviously, being the more serious of the GBHs, it carries the highest sentence as well.
Yes, it's indictable only, section 18, whereas section 20 is either way. And for a section 18, the starting point, if a person is to be found guilty, would be they'll be looking at least a 3-year custodial sentence. So we're not even looking at community service.
And the highest
maximum is 16 years.
Yeah, 16 years maximum.
So it's really serious.
Yeah, the seriousness of the offences, they try and reflect that, and obviously the sentencing that you would receive. Whilst we were talking about that, did you guys know that headbutting is considered very serious, and it's akin to using a weapon?
And teeth as well.
Teeth.
Yeah, if you use your teeth during an assault, it's akin to using a weapon, and that would aggravate any sentence.
I said akin.
Yeah, that would aggravate any sentence.
Yeah, so within the sentencing guidelines, you have aggravating and mitigating features. So yeah, if you were to bite someone whilst getting into a brawl, then that makes it a lot more serious. And if you use your head to headbutt someone, then that's likened to using a weapon. So again, the seriousness of the offence is increased.
There's one category of offences I'd like to discuss, given that, a lot of people, listeners, even children nowadays are using online. That basically their whole life is consolidated into a phone.
Or
You can
laptop or
laptop,
tablets.
in which incidentally I'm using at the moment. Um, so in terms of I've seen a spike in offences, in online offences where adults are communicating with underage children, um, communicating inappropriately with underage children. Little do they know that on the other end of that little child's profile is actually a decoy. So it's often a paedophile hunter group operating that account, and they're posing as a 13-year-old, and the communications are taking place, and they develop, um, and eventually they get to a stage where the police are notified and you'll have police attend your address. Sometimes I've had like a couple of cases like this. Even the paedophile hunter group attend the address, and they're broadcasting live. So first and foremost, the Supreme Court have already ruled recently, that any evidence obtained through a paedophile group is admissible in court. It's not entrapment. I think that was about a year and a half ago. That ruling was made by the Supreme Court. So it's not entrapment.
Entrapment is more by the Secretary of the State, and by that they mean, for example, like police officers, if they were to do something like that.
Yeah, I don't want to go into entrapment, but I'm just saying that it is admissible evidence. I had another case recently where someone was communicating with a decoy, i.e., someone operating an account posing as a 13-year-old, and they went out of their way to hire a vehicle, meet up with the individual, and when they arrived at the scene, the paedophile hunter group were there, police were called, and he was arrested. I mean, it's always good to, as an adult, you shouldn't be communicating with, underage girls which you don't know,
Or boys.
And there's no reason for having sort of explicit conversations online. It's not right. Obviously, there are a lot of youngsters, actual youngsters. Fortunately, in the cases I've dealt with, they weren't actual youngsters, like teenage girls and underage girls. Fortunately, but there are a lot of children who have Facebook accounts, and even as parents, it's good to always check who their interactions are with, and equally as adults, if we have Facebook accounts, we should always be wary of who we're communicating with, what we're saying, whether it's appropriate, the language we're using, and as Muslims, we should always look at our intentions, and our intention should always be clean and free from any sort of ulterior motives. So I think it's important. Online safety, definitely, from both, from particularly from as parent, from a parent's perspective. It's always good to overlook what your child is doing and how they're using the Facebook account. I don't have a Facebook account. I assume that there's some sort of parental controls built into such accounts, where if you specify your date of birth and you're under a particular age, I'm assuming, I don't have Facebook myself,
but I think you generally,
as surprising as that may seem.
Yeah, I've heard of that, where they generally can do that in terms, not just confined to Facebook, but just online usage, have more parental sort of control as to what, with the devices, what they can access. But I
Yeah,
think definitely there's been a lot of spike in those types of cases. I think especially with all the lockdown and everything else, people have been indoors and everything's pretty much remote access. So unfortunately, it's a lot that's available online. Children these days do use social media a lot more heavily than perhaps what they used to many years ago. So there is a strong presence, and of course, it means
yeah.
there's
Like they
more
want to
interaction.
yeah, they want to communicate with their friends. That's absolutely fine. But then that they shouldn't therefore become a target to
No,
adults with ulterior motives, in order just to sort of educate our children as well. Tell them directly, there are people online who use social media for nefarious purposes. Just to instill that awareness on them. If someone's just added you on Facebook or made a friend request, do you know them? Have you had any interactions with them before? Do you know why they've added you? Have they sent you any messages? Just to go through that filtering.
true.
Obviously, if it's their friend that they know physically and they have no hesitation, but
Yeah.
it's a global village.
Of
Global
course,
village.
I think we apply more precaution day-to-day interactions when we actually meet people. You wouldn't randomly start speaking to somebody on the street and become really overly friendly with them. Whereas online, I feel it's a lot easier to do that.
Oh, you feel that you're in your comfort zone and
Yeah,
protected because they're not physically there.
of course. I think that's the issue, and there are a lot of people who prey on that. And we do have
That is a because online grooming, it's not an instant process. It can be
no,
drawn out over a number of years. We've heard about terrible cases in the news where it it it, it spans across a number of years,
for months. I mean, it
and
varies.
if a conversation takes place, often the child discloses certain issues they may be facing in their life, and then the the person on the receiving end sometimes can use that to their advantage, and almost emotionally sort of motivate and
Yeah.
tailor their sort of communications to suit the person's predicament.
I think online as well, people readily provide a lot of information. I did a course on cybercrime where it was really interesting. It was provided by
The Metropolis
the Metropolitan Police
action fraud.
who specialize in action fraud. And it was so interesting that, like, when you go online, the amount of details that you can provide for people who want to hack in, who want to commit offenses, it's such valuable data to them. A lot of people post things, when you have your location settings on, and they post pictures of where they are, and in terms of what they're doing, the school that they go to, or any kind of information. So if somebody really wants to target, for example, if someone's going away for a weekend and they put it on their Facebook, oh, going away for this weekend, and put their location, they showed how easy it was actually for some people to track down where you are. They know that, okay, it's an empty house. If they want to burgle, or even if someone becomes infatuated with someone online, to really pinpoint where do they live, what school do they go to, who are the group of friends, and gaining access in that way. And there was one kind of test they conducted outside a coffee shop where people were asked just to like the coffee, the store, after getting their coffee. And every time they went on to Facebook to like it, they then drew up all their information. So, when you go to get your coffee and they write your name on the cups. So what they were doing as part of this test was they wrote people's like bank details, who they bank with, where they live for however many years. And obviously people were really shocked, but this was just from them liking a Facebook page. But they're like, all that information is drawn from what they have available. So you should really look at your security settings, your password settings, and make sure that they are secure.
Yeah, we're not saying obviously that to extract that level of information from Facebook, it requires some sort of expertise. It's not being suggested at any moment that Facebook is not security protected. I don't think anyone in their right frame of mind would publish their bank account details on Facebook. So
No, of
I'm
course
not
not.
privy to how that experiment came about or how it was explained, but obviously, like just by a simple like on a coffee shop, you can extract bank details. I'm not sure the context of that, but equally, Facebook has its own internal security settings. I mean, yeah, it would be interesting to hear about that experiment directly.
I think it's more to sort of utilize, not about their bank details as such, but more as to who they bank with. If people were to put that information on, I think there was some people.
Don't think anyone right. Yeah. In terms of details and stuff, that brings me on nicely to there's a scam that's going around. It's called smishing and phishing. So smishing is when you send a text message with a link, and phishing is when you send an email with a link. So there's a number of scams going around where individuals are sent messages, text messages or emails purporting to be from the HMRC, saying that talking about tax returns, and there's one example of your parcel that was due to be delivered by Royal Mail has not been delivered. Please click on this link. Once you click on the link, you're asked to fill in a form. The website you're directed to looks exactly like a government website. You enter all your details, and then those details are sent to an individual who's operating that server, and now they have all your details, your name, date of birth. It in a technical term, it's called FULLZ, FULLZ. And with those details, they can create a bank account in your name. They can do make purchases in your name, do various fraud. So if you receive a message like that, a message or an email, I think the government, the HMRC guidance is we'll never send an email or a message of that nature. So loads of people have fallen for this scam, unfortunately, particularly the vulnerable. Like even, I'm sure listeners out there, you have elderly parents who are keen users of smartphones, as it enables them to communicate with their family members abroad for free, so just to raise that awareness within your own community and within your own family, that if such messages are sent around, try to avoid them like the plague. Do not click on the link because it's most likely going to be a scam. I mean, I receive those types of messages and emails on a daily basis and just ignore them. It's just a phishing expedition to enable you to give your details, and for you then to be a victim of fraud.
You can report them as well, isn't it? Just you do that usually via Twitter or.
Yeah, report them. I think it's via the Action Fraud website. If you just Google Action Fraud, it will take you to the designated cybercrime unit department of the Metropolitan Police, who will then carry out their investigation. But the starting point is you need, huh? He's doing it. Listeners that are just joining us, you're listening to The Legal Hour with me, Mohammed,
And Selena.
On Ramadan Radio London 87.9. We're streaming online at ramadanradio.org and streaming on Facebook and YouTube. Do make this the first time that you're making the call. We haven't received a call or a text or a WhatsApp message to date. The number to do that on is 077 614 60614. If the number again given by my learned co-host is
077 614 60614.
what offence shall we discuss next? I'll be guided by your what offence would we've gone through online. We're the lead. We've gone through online offences. We've gone through assault. Oh, we've gone through assault. We've gone through assault. We've gone through indictable offences. We've gone through the sentencing guidelines.
Yeah, we have. So this is our pick and mix. So we can talk about anything really.
Well, I've spoken about certain aspects of cybercrime and how it's quite prevalent, particularly targeted sort of grooming. I've spoken about phishing and smishing messages that are being sent out purporting to be from the HMRC. It's your turn now.
Yeah, I'm thinking criminal damage. So criminal damage, it doesn't have to be permanent damage, it can be temporary damage. And that...
Are you guilty of criminal damage if you damage your own property?
No,
Oh,
I don't think you are.
you didn't say that.
No, you're not.
What needs to be proven in order to be found guilty of criminal damage?
It's reckless or intentional
Yeah.
damage to another's property. And the damage doesn't need to be permanent. It can be temporary. So feel free to. Okay.
So if I take a piece of chalk and write on the pavement, is that criminal damage?
That's criminal damage. Even though it can easily be washed away, or the rain could come and wash it away, that's still criminal damage.
Inshallah, I think that's our array of offences that we wanted to discuss with you today. You've been listening to the Legal Hour with me, Mohammed, and
Selena on Ramadan Radio London 87.9 FM.
Do tune in next week at 11 a.m. where we will be back. It will be our final show, inshallah, if it's not easy. Oh, okay. Jazakallah khair for listening, and we'll see you all next week. Do tune in 11 a.m. every
Inshallah.
Wednesday. This is the last Wednesday, and we're going to keep it a surprise what we'll be discussing next Wednesday.
Okay, inshallah.
Because it's the last show.
Yeah.
Jazakallah khair for listening.
Assalamu alaikum, everyone.